2 Samuel chapter 9. David asked, "Is there anyone still left of the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Now there was a servant of Saul's household named Ziba. They summoned him to appear before David, and the king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" "At your service," he replied. The king asked, "Is there no one still alive from the house of Saul to whom I can show God's kindness?" Ziba answered the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan. He is lame in both feet." "Where is he?" the king asked. Ziba answered, "He is at the house of Makir, son of Ammiel, in Lo Debar." So King David had him brought from Lo Debar, from the house of Makir, son of Ammiel. When Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor. David said, "Mephibosheth." "At your service," he replied. "Don't be afraid," David said to him, "for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table." Mephibosheth bowed down and said, "What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me?" Then the king summoned Ziba, Saul's steward, and said to him, "I have given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants are to farm the land for him and bring in the crops, so that your master's grandson may be provided for. And Mephibosheth, grandson of your master, will always eat at my table." Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Then Ziba said to the king, "Your servant will do whatever my lord the king commands his servants to do." So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. Mephibosheth had a young son named Makir, and all the members of Ziba's household were servants of Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem because he always ate at the king's table. He was lame in both feet.
There has been a lot said, and rightly so, in the last 25 years about how relationships have changed. FOMO is a familiar acronym in the modern world. It's a fear of missing out. You can feel like you're the odd one out, like the person on the screen. And so the temptation is always to keep your options open. But cultural observers have noticed how we have changed in our personal interactions, our personal relationships, whether it be with our neighbors, whether it be with friends at work, whether it be interactions at church, even thinking spatially, if that's all horizontal, we've even changed how we interact with God. We've changed how we interact with our God. Many people think now that when the commitment gets tough, the tough don't get going. The tough quit, and the tough find a relationship that is easier. Billy Ocean was wrong. He's performing, this is product placement at Sandown actually, in the middle of next year. I saw that yesterday. But Billy Ocean was wrong. Remember that song in the 80s, if you're above 35, when the going gets tough, tough get going? But that's not applicable anymore. Someone's singing it now, I can see them. Someone's singing it and they're, you can ask them to sing it privately later on. Back to the sermon. How you interact with people has changed. When the going gets too tough, when the cost gets too great, you can just let that covenant end. You can let that commitment come to a stop because convenience reigns. Convenience rules. So out with commitment, out with cost, certainly out with covenant, and convenience is what rules and reigns in your heart. So this person is asking too much of me. I'm just going to slide and hit reverse from the relationship and find one that's not as demanding as the one that I'm in. Relationships don't really stick anymore. We change our friends and we define what that means by someone being low cost, low maintenance, an acquaintance, someone even that's electronically called a friend rather than someone who's really close to us. And what's the cost? Well, there's a massive cost when our relationships change from covenant to consumeristic understanding, and that is society becomes more fragmented. Society becomes more fragmented. We thought a few weeks back how loneliness is an epidemic. And we thought about how loneliness is a familiar friend. The irony in that sentence is palpable in the modern world, especially to mature and aged people. People get isolated, but the key principle is this: when this relationship costs me too much, when the demands are too great, I'll just trade it in for a different one and for an easier one. It's very observable in the last 25 years at least. And then you come to 2 Samuel chapter 9. This passage has a lot to say to our understanding of what friendship, what covenant, what commitment looks like. And we need to listen to it very carefully. Now, I trust you remember in the time of the monarchy, and we're almost at the high point of God's dealings with his people in the Old Testament. And that happens under the king Solomon, which is David's son. But we've gone through the first king through Saul, the heartbreak and heartache that he caused. He was rejected by God. And now God's people are being led by God's king, who's King David. And David is sat on Israel's throne. He's the ruler. We saw from last week how chapter 7, verse 1, God's people are beginning to enjoy something of God's blessing under God's king, enjoying his rule and reign. And so there's now rest, lots of R's in that sentence. There's rest from God's enemies. And now we come to King David, who is sat in his throne, longing to impart that blessing to someone else. What does King David desire? Point number one. What does King David desire above all? Let's think about that. Well, 3 sentences to draw your attention to, please. What does David desire? Look at verse 1 of 2 Samuel chapter 9. Look at verse 3. And then cast your eye down, please, to verse 7. 1, 3, and 7. 1. Is there anyone still left in the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake? 3. Is there no one still left of the house of Saul to whom I can, and so on. Verse 7. I will surely show you kindness to someone, he's speaking, for Jonathan's sake. This word kindness that's underscored on the screen is limp. It's poor. It's really robbing us of something that's very significant, arguably one of the most significant words in the Old Testament, which is, I'm glad no one sat on the front row, chesed. It's the word chesed. That's as Hebrew as I'm going to get this morning. Hesed is God's covenant love towards his people. Hesed. It's translated in our Bibles steadfast love, covenant love. Trying to get that weight of the meaning of the word across. Or goodness and faithfulness. We've already had one superb children's Bible presented to us this morning. Here's the next. If you want clarity, often go to good modern children's Bibles. This is the definition that has brought more meaning and understanding to my heart than any Hebrew word study. The Jesus Storybook Bible is fantastic. This is the word hesed, explained for kids' benefits and adults too. God's hesed is his never stopping, never giving up, always and forever love. That is a superb definition of the word hesed. And in chapter 9 and in chapter 10, very interestingly, King David wants to show hesed, kindness, to 2 different people, chapter 9, chapter 10. And he gets 2 very different responses from the individuals to whom he shows God's hesed. Look at the key sentence for our passage, please. Verse 7. King David is saying, I want to show you kindness. I want to give you covenant love. Why? The sentence continues, for the sake of your father Jonathan. Now, if you've been with us in the autumn, remember the backstory. Samuel was sent by God to anoint King David to be the next king of Israel after Saul. Saul was furious and he wanted to end his life and protect his reign. And so he threw spears. He did creative thinking about how he could take David out of the picture and how he could retain his dynasty. Interestingly, though, Saul has one response, which is, I want to wipe David off the face of the earth. His son, Jonathan, who was next in command and next in rule and reign and next in the dynastic line of Saul, he has a very different response to David. He doesn't want to take him out, and arguably, Jonathan has more to lose than Saul. And yet Jonathan sees God's anointed, King David. And in that remarkable scene at the start of 1 Samuel chapter 18, David is bestowed upon him all the rights and all the glory and all the vestiges of royalty by Jonathan, the next in line. Do you remember? He gives him his cloak, his robe, he gives him his sword, he gives him, so to speak, his crown. God's Spirit enables Jonathan to see in David God's anointed one, God's future promised king. And Jonathan says, I will get out of the way because I must promote you. I must see your increase and your growth. And this remarkable God-centered friendship and covenant that the two men, Jonathan and David, cut one to another. It's there in 1 Samuel 18, 19, and 20. This covenant commitment that says, no matter what happens, we want to see each other prosper. And Jonathan says, I will get out of the way to see God prosper you. I will do whatever is necessary to protect you from my father Saul, who wants to remove your head from your shoulders, or at least put a spear through your torso. So I'm going to warn you, I'm going to protect you even unto my own death and at my own cost. In 1 Samuel chapter 20, verse 14, Jonathan articulates this covenant. Let's listen in, it's on the screen. Jonathan says, but show me, talking to David, but show me unfailing kindness, Hesed, like that of the Lord, as long as I live, so that I may not be killed. And do not ever cut off your kindness from my family, not even when the Lord has cut off every one of David's enemies from the face of the earth. Don't forget me. No matter what the cost, please remember this promise. Now we're 15 to 20 years, something like that. 15 to 20 years later in the story in 2 Samuel chapter 9. And here's something remarkable. David has never forgotten the covenant promise. Verse 1, verse 3, verse 7. He's never forgotten the covenant promise that he cut with Jonathan. And he says, verse 3, I want to show you chesed. I want to show you God's chesed. I want to bless you. I want to prosper you. I want to reveal to you what God has done in my heart so that you would see the blessing of God in your life. Here's the point. God's covenant love has come into the life of David. We saw that last week. David had forgotten. And it says in chapter 7, verse 8, this is what the Lord Almighty did. He took you from here and he did this in your life, and now you're prince over Israel. That's grace in your life. And so David, having cut this covenant with Jonathan and with everyone in Jonathan's family, therefore, says, God has done this in my life. I've received from God his covenant, his never stopping, always and forever love. And I want to pass it on to you. That's what happens in a Christian's life. The covenant love of God makes you a committer rather than a consumer. It makes you someone who's unafraid to commit to things. It makes you unafraid to make deep, personal, God-centered relationships with other people. It makes you unafraid to commit to ministry in churches, no matter what the cost. It makes you unafraid to be one-to-ones with people because you've received the love of God and you're desperate to say, can I read the Bible with you, non-Christian friend? I know it's inconvenient. My life is nuts. Christmas is coming. Pressure's on. I'm in the middle stage of life. I'm pulled beneath with kids, and I've got loved ones ahead of me that are facing the struggles of old age. I'm stretched, and yet I've received God's love, and so I'm committed to you no matter what it costs. This is what a consumer relationship looks like. The relationship is there to meet your needs. And if your needs are not being met, you're out of here. But a covenant relationship, you sacrifice your needs to sustain the relationship. You serve and you maintain the relationship and you're committed to that relationship even when the other person is not meeting your needs. Now there are caveats and there are concerns and qualifications that we can have to that, but you get the principle. Consumer relationships say my needs before yours. Covenant relationships say your needs before mine. Now, marriage is not always the best example of that, but it should be. There's a man on the screen called B.B. Warfield. If you Google him, you'll see a set of 10 volumes of his collected works. He was a theologian in America at the start of the last century. He taught at Princeton, and his writings are very well known and worth reading. What's not known is the story of his marriage. Benjamin and Annie were married on the 3rd of August 1876, and immediately after their wedding, they went to Europe. B.B. Warfield was to teach and train other men for ministry and other women too in Leipzig in Germany. And so he thought, I know how to show a girl a good time. Let's have a honeymoon as well. Typical man. Anyway, there they were in Germany, and they were walking in the beautiful German mountains. And then something happened on one of the long walks that they enjoyed. Let me read. They were overtaken by a terrific thunderstorm. It was so great and so loud that something happened in Annie's experience, in her person, that she would never fully recover from the shock to her nervous system, and she was more or less an invalid during the rest of her life. B.B. Warfield only left her for his seminary duties, but never for more than 2 hours at a time. His world was limited to his duties and the care of his wife. Mrs. Warfield, Annie required his constant attention and care. For 39 years, one of his students noted that when he saw the Warfields walking together, quote, the gentleness of his manner was striking proof of the love and care with which he surrounded her. 39 years. Chesed is the power of covenant love and commitment. My wife needs care, and I've made a covenant with her. Her needs before mine. Covenant love. Covenant love cuts you off from other options. Covenant love means you may have FOMO. But when you experience the covenant love of God, the default mode of your heart is not consumerism, it's covenant. You're willing to limit your freedom. You're willing to pay the cost. I don't just mean financial, but every definition of that word. You're willing to lose your options to be part of a ministry team, to make a prayer meeting, to be committed to a life group, to be committed to another person, to be committed to someone in your family that has needs that need to be met. Oh, I could never do that. That's too costly. You don't understand the pressures in my life and so on. Well, maybe I don't, but here's the great irony. When you and if you commit yourself to other people in a covenantal relationship, actually it's liberation. You think less and less of yourself and you think more of someone else. There's nothing more liberating than being in a one-to-one when you know that the other person is for you. There's nothing more liberating than being in a circle of friends at different stages of life, at the same stages of life, and they are your band of sisters. They are your band of brothers. There's nothing more liberating than that, to say, they have a profound need, I'm going to do everything I can in God's strength to meet that need, because I know that when the time comes for a need in my life, they are for me. There's nothing more liberating than that, but there is a cost. David was out to give covenant love, but notice to whom he gives it. He doesn't give it to a friend. David gives covenant love to an enemy. That's the second point. Who does David show covenant love to? And let's see how many times I can butcher his name. Here's the second point. Who does David give covenant love to? David has received far than he asked or imagined, but now we are introduced to another character. And please be slow in the reading of the passage. Notice who the person is described, or rather how they're described, before they're named. Notice all the information we receive before we receive the name. David wants to give God's covenant love to someone in Jonathan's or Saul's household. So verse 3 we learn, a son of Jonathan. Verse 3 we learn again, he's crippled in both feet. That's a cross-reference to chapter 4, verse 4, when you read of the tragedy of a nurse trying to escape with Mephibosheth. And sadly, there's an accident, and Mephibosheth is dropped, and his feet are both crippled for all of his life. His life is changed because of tragedy in childhood. Verse 4, he's living in Lo Debar. Literally, he's living in a nowhere place, a place with no name. It's so insignificant. What should we call it? A nowhere place. And then finally, verse 6, as you look down, his name is revealed. Mephibosheth. Now that's got two meanings. One, who scatters shame. Check that out for a name. Or from the mouth of shame. It could mean that as well. So this man from nowhere place, with a name that means the spreader of shame, or from the mouth of shame, is called into the king's palace and is called before the king. Verse 6. What does he do? He bowed down to pay David, his king, honor. Literally, the word says he made himself prostrate. So he's on his hands and knees where he spent all of his life. He's not in a wheelchair. That wasn't developed at that point. He was used to eating the dust and being covered in it. And so he hits the ground before the king. He threw himself on the floor. Verse 7. Why does David have to say to him, don't be afraid? Probably because he's trembling. He's terrified. Verse 8. Notice how he speaks about himself. What is your servant, says Mephibosheth of himself, that you should notice a dead dog like me? It's not self-deprecation. He's afraid. Here's a picture of the grandson of the first king of Israel. He's living in nowhere land. His name means shame. And yet he's brought from the place of anonymity and shame to the king's palace. But why is he terrified? Verse 7. Why is he afraid? I am convinced that he thought he was being brought into David's presence to have his head removed from his shoulders. Convinced of that. He is an enemy of David's lineage. He's an enemy of David's royalty. He could be a rallying point for the enemies of David and for those loyal to Saul and to his family. But if you know ancient history, this is how ruling worked. When there was a new king appointed to the throne, as someone called Dale Ralph Davis taught me this week, the name of the game was purge. The name of the game was purge. You would round up everyone in opposition and you would kill them because you want to reinforce your political stability. You want to give yourself credibility that the old age is gone and the new age has come. It was expedient policy. And we don't have to just go to the ancient Near East and look for stuff outside of the Bible. The evidence of this is in the Bible itself. You see it of King Baasha in 1 Kings 15. You see it of King Zimri in 1 Kings 16. You see it of Jehu in 2 Kings 10. This is how you maintain power, by purging the place where you are ruling of everyone in opposition to you. Of the old regime, they would all be lined up, not shot, but they will be lined up, maybe hung or killed and certainly humiliated. You promote and protect your own honor and dynasty, and you get rid of the previous one. No threats allowed. Do you see David should have killed Mephibosheth as the first butcher? And instead he shows him his covenant love. Mephibosheth was a threat, but notice what he says. He's the key man. He's the last person in the enemy camp. And what does he receive? Verse 7. David showers Mephibosheth with covenant love. Verse 7, I'm going to give you everything back that belonged to your grandfather. I'm going to give you your land back. I'm going to prosper you economically. Remember where he came from? Lo Debar. Remember the meaning of his name? I'm going to give everything that belonged to your grandfather Saul back. I'm going to restore you. I'm going to restore your inheritance to you that was taken from you. Then look at the table. Verse 7, verse 10, verse 11, verse 13. 4 times, I want you to eat at my table. That's prosperity. That's adoption. That's welcoming. That's inclusion. You won't be groveling at my feet like a servant. You will be treated as a son of mine. Verse 9, Ziba, I want you and your sons, 35 people. I want you all to spend all your energies farming, cultivating all of Saul's land for the sake of Mephibosheth and his servants and his family. Work hard to bless him. There will be an abundance of crops and produce for his sake. Verse 11, this is a remarkable sentence. Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. David has adopted Mephibosheth into his family. Once an enemy, now seated at his table. Do you realize David is taking his life in his hands? As long as Mephibosheth is alive, David has a threat. Do you realize he's limiting himself? Do you realize that he was taking this danger upon himself? He's making himself vulnerable. But that's what covenant love does. It doesn't protect yourself by standing back, by, to quote C.S. Lewis, putting your heart in a vacuum-sealed container so that it might never be broken again. That's not what covenant love does. It risks, it moves towards, it expresses benevolence again and again. There's a lot for us to learn from this. There's at least a couple of things. Here's the first one. Notice David representing the character of God. He's modeling for us to reach out across the divide, across whatever has happened, towards our enemies. Yeah, but you don't understand how much I've been hurt by this person in my family, by this person in my street. You don't understand and you never will. Well, notice this. Jesus says, bless those who persecute you. Bless those who harm you. Love your enemies. It's right at the heart of the New Testament, and it's right at the heart of the whole Bible, because it's at the heart of God's character. Here we have David reaching out, taking the risk, paying the cost to someone from a different tribe. Jonathan's from the tribe of Benjamin. David's from the tribe of Judah. So ethnically, there is a danger, there is a risk of tribalism. And he says it's not going to get in the way of God's covenant love. Other religions believe that if you come to know God, it's because of your own efforts. You need to clean yourself up. You need to do good works. You need to start to pray. You need to start to do God's will. You've sought him, now you've found him, now you should be accepted by him. That's what every other religion does. That's how they operate. But notice that Mephibosheth does nothing. He receives. Doesn't clean himself up. He doesn't journey himself. David goes out and seeks him. And in this is a microcosm. It's a beautiful picture of the whole Bible. The Bible says that's not how we approach God. God approaches us. No one seeks for God. No, not one. No one can come to me unless the Father draws him. While we were yet enemies, we were reconciled through the blood, through the death of Jesus. Do you see the difference? Religion says clean yourself up, get ready, do good, do more, work harder, pedal faster. And then Christianity says all you need to do is receive. I will provide everything. I will move towards you. Don't wait till you're cleaned up or you'll never come. We're brought before God, and in his presence we find adoption, we find freedom, we find fellowship, we find joy because of everything God has done in his son Jesus. And here's the thing. In his service is perfect freedom that can't be found anywhere else. That's the very essence of what it looks like to be a follower of God. And David reflects that as he calls in his potential and real life enemy, Mephibosheth. He comes before him, Mephibosheth, and he expects to be stricken, to be smitten by him, and yet he receives everything. He's abundantly blessed beyond his wildest dreams. I want you to sit at my table. I'm going to treat you as a son. You can have your land back, and you will be provided for abundantly. Yeah, you who live in nowhere place on you with the name of shame. You're no longer a servant. I'm going to treat you as a son. Now, how can David do such a thing? Thirdly, finally, how can David do such a thing? More importantly, perhaps even more practically, what does it mean to us? Let's try and apply this a wee bit. How in the world can we love our enemies? How can we cross racial divides, family divides, economic, social divides, and so on? How can we go against the flow of a consumer culture? And how can we show people the love of God is Hesed love in a way that we don't have resources to ourselves? How can we start to live in relationships where we're more faithful to people, although the cost is high? How can we be loving towards people if it costs us our freedom? How can we commit to one or two things rather than being a FOMO and keeping all options open and so being someone who's commitment averse? How can we do that? Well, why could David love Mephibosheth? Why could he do that? Because David had God's covenant love modeled to him, not just in his actions from God to David, but also in the actions of Jonathan to David. Jonathan loved David unconditionally, no matter what it cost him. Jonathan, as it were, lost his earthly throne. I'll get off the throne because God has revealed to me that you are the Lord's anointed. So Jonathan got off the throne of Israel so David could be on the throne of Israel. But we have a friend who's even a greater friend than Jonathan. We have a friend in Jesus, is the one whom Jonathan pointed to, who also left his throne for us. David had a friend who died on Mount Gilboa at the end of 1 Samuel. We have a friend who died on Mount Calvary. And this is what he says: I no longer call you servants. Instead, I've called you friends. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you to go and bear fruit. Greater love has no one than this, than he laid down his life for his friends. Therefore, love one another. There it is. Mephibosheth didn't deserve any or all of this. Jonathan did. Jonathan did. But Jonathan's faithfulness to David is imputed to Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth is treated how Jonathan deserves to be treated. And so he's brought into the king's presence. He's welcomed at the king's table, not as a servant, but as a son. And he receives this new status. Shame is removed. Banishment is removed. And he's drawn in to the king's blessing. Friends, you and I do not deserve any of the blessings of the gospel because of how we've lived. We don't deserve forgiveness. We can't earn it. We don't deserve adoption, and yet we find ourselves sons and daughters of the king. We do not deserve, and yet we have received every spiritual blessing in Christ. And God treats us not how we deserve, but how Christ deserves. It's the great exchange. We receive the blessings of God because he sees us by faith as his sons and daughters and treats us with the righteousness of Christ. That's why Paul can say, I want to be found in him, in Jesus Christ, not having a righteousness of my own, but a righteousness that's through faith in Jesus Christ. A righteousness that comes from God and is by faith. To the degree you understand that, once you understand that, once you meditate on that, when you've been moved by that and molded by that, when you realize that you were an enemy who's no longer a servant but is a son, when you realize that you were an enemy of God but now you're welcomed as his friend, then you're treated not just as well as Jonathan was treated, but actually the greater Jonathan. Then you're able to start loving other people. You're able to start giving yourself away. You're able to stop thinking, what's in this relationship for me, consumer? How can I love them? Covenant. You can limit yourself in relationships, but wisely, but also generously. You can stop gliding past people that are too costly, and you can stop and you can invest wisely. You can serve other people through ministry in lots of different shapes and sizes. You can show other people costly covenant love. Why? Because that's what we've received in Christ. The church is a miracle. One writer put it this way: what binds us together is not common education, or common race, or common income levels, or common politics, or common nationality, or common accents or common jobs or anything else. Christians come together because they've been loved by Jesus himself. They are a band of natural enemies who love one another for Jesus' sake.